I had been counting down the days to the housewarming, imagining how everything would feel. The soft hum of the ocean outside, the sunlight glinting off the glass walls, the laughter of friends filling every corner of my new $6 million villa. I meticulously sent out the invitations, each one carefully worded to reflect my excitement, my pride, and secretly, a touch of subtle challenge. I pictured my parents opening theirs, expecting maybe a proud smile or even a congratulatory note. But when I saw their response, or rather their lack of it, I felt an odd mix of shock, hurt, and simmering anger. "They won't come," I whispered to myself, staring at my phone in disbelief. All those years of dismissive comments, overlooked birthdays, and cold indifference suddenly crystallized into a bitter sting. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it wasn't about them. Yet the wound throbbed, reminding me of the familiar pattern of neglect. My parents' absence wasn't just a snub. It was a statement, the kind that reverberates deeper than words, cutting through pride and hope alike. I imagined them, comfortably distant, choosing someone else's life over mine, and it fueled a strange resolve inside me. This wasn't just about missing a party. It was about finally understanding the dynamic that had shaped every triumph and failure in my life. The villa, once a symbol of freedom and accomplishment, now felt like a stage, and I was the lead in a story that they had consistently ignored. Their decline highlighted the very tension I had always lived with. Success on one side, parental neglect on the other, and me caught squarely in the middle. And in that sharp, uncomfortable moment, I realized that tonight, whether they showed up or not, I would take my victory and make it undeniable. Their absence had ignited a fire I hadn't known I needed, a craving to be seen, celebrated, and recognized. And nothing, not even them, would dim it. I set the invitations down, feeling the weight of their rejection, but also the flicker of satisfaction at the thought of everyone else arriving to witness my triumph. Tonight, the villa would be alive with laughter, with stories, with joy, and my parents by choice would miss it all. That absence, that deliberate neglect, had already written the first act of my quiet, thrilling revenge. And as I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the ocean waves crash, I let myself smile. They might have said no, but I was saying yes to myself, to my achievements, and to a night they would never forget. As I sipped my coffee that morning, staring at the turquoise waves beyond the villa, memories began to surface, sharp and unrelenting. I remembered the birthday parties I'd spent quietly in a corner, while my siblings received lavish gifts and attention. I recalled the times my achievements were casually dismissed. "It's fine. It's not that important," my father would mutter, or my mother would shrug, absorbed in someone else's conversation. Those moments, small as they seemed at the time, had piled up into an invisible wall separating me from the warmth I craved. I had tried to shrug them off, telling myself that family wasn't about fairness, but each slight etched a deeper mark on my sense of worth. Flashbacks danced before my eyes. My 16th birthday, a cake half forgotten, a few obligatory photos, and the gaping absence of congratulations. Later, when I graduated, my parents barely glanced up from their phones, while friends' parents cheered their children as if their lives depended on it. I felt the sting of invisibility, the bitter contrast between their attentiveness to others and their cold indifference toward me. I wondered how my parents could be so blind to the pain they caused, or if they simply didn't care. These thoughts twisted inside me, a mix of sorrow and smoldering anger. I had spent so many years internalizing their favoritism, wondering if I was asking too much, if my desire to be acknowledged was unreasonable. Every holiday dinner I was sidelined, every school achievement barely noted, every whispered comparison to my more promising sibling. It all played back in my mind, each memory sharper than the last. And yet, these recollections no longer made me bitter in the way they once had. They fueled determination. I remembered feeling small, rejected, invisible. And now, standing in this villa I had earned with my own hands, I realized that my past pain had prepared me for this moment. I thought about the subtle, dismissive ways they would exclude me from conversations and events. And I understood that tonight's housewarming wasn't just a celebration of my home. It was the culmination of every overlooked achievement, every dismissed feeling, every quiet tear shed in solitude. For the first time, their neglect became the backdrop to my empowerment, the contrast between who I had been and who I had become. And while sorrow lingered, it had transformed into a steely resolve, a readiness to finally rewrite the narrative they had always ignored. Tonight I would show, without words, without confrontation, that I was no longer the overlooked child. They were the ones missing out. And the realization of that gave me a thrill I hadn't felt in years. Stepping through the front doors of my villa, I couldn't help but marvel at the space I had created for myself, a world entirely of my own making. The floor-to-ceiling windows framed the endless stretch of ocean, sunlight spilling across marble floors that gleamed like liquid gold. Each room reflected not just luxury, but freedom, the freedom to live on my own terms, to finally define what home meant without anyone's judgment or interference. The living room opened seamlessly into the terrace, where the scent of salt water mingled with the crisp aroma of fresh flowers I had arranged in tall, elegant vases. My kitchen gleamed with the latest appliances, but it was more than utility. It was a symbol of independence, the tools I had earned through years of hard work and perseverance. Upstairs, the bedrooms overlooked the crashing waves, a private sanctuary where no one could diminish my accomplishments. Even the pool, with its infinity edge, seemed to stretch into eternity, reflecting my ambition and the distance I had traveled from the days of being sidelined and overlooked. I imagined my parents peering through the invitation, realizing they had chosen absence while life celebrated me in ways they had never cared to notice. The contrast was sharp and deliciously ironic. They comfortably ensconced in their routines, missing the grandeur, the joy, the validation I now radiated. Every detail of this home screamed achievement and freedom, and every polished surface mirrored my reflection, a reflection of resilience, determination, and a quiet, unshakable pride. Their absence wasn't just noticeable, it hung in the air, thick with tension, a silent acknowledgement that they had made a choice, and that choice left them out of the most visible testament to my success. And as I walked through the villa, touching the smooth railings, feeling the warm sunlight on my face, I knew that tonight, as laughter and admiration filled these rooms, the reality of their absence would be impossible to ignore. It was one thing to achieve this for myself, but it was another entirely to let them witness, even indirectly, the life they had chosen not to be part of, a life of luxury, freedom, and undeniable triumph. I spent the afternoon carefully crafting the final invitations, each one a reflection of both elegance and subtle intention. Friends who had cheered me on through the years, colleagues who had witnessed my climb, mentors who had guided me, they all received personalized notes, warm yet hinting at the grandeur to come. Every word was deliberate, designed to convey excitement and the promise of celebration without revealing the quiet undercurrent of calculated defiance. I paused over my parents' names, deliberately leaving them off the list, a small but powerful act that made my chest tighten with a mix of guilt and satisfaction. Once the invitations were sent, the messages began arriving almost immediately. I can't wait to see it. I've heard so much about your villa. Are you serious about the ocean view? Each text carried anticipation, curiosity, and a hint of envy, and I reveled in it. My phone buzzed constantly as friends debated attire and arrival times, their excitement palpable even through the screen. In those moments, I felt a deep surge of empowerment, the kind that comes not just from wealth, but from finally taking control of the narrative, deciding who mattered and who didn't. I imagined snippets of conversation, whispers in cafes, surprised glances, the subtle admiration that would greet my guests as they arrived. And behind it all lingered the unspoken truth that my parents would not be there, the gap they left creating a tension that heightened every other interaction. Every invitation felt like a declaration, a small act of defiance wrapped in civility. And with each response I read, I felt a thrill of anticipation for the night to come. By the time the last RSVPs had rolled in, the villa had already begun to feel alive in my mind, filled with laughter, curiosity, and admiration. And yet, at the edge of it all, the thought of my parents' absence kept the fire burning, a reminder that tonight would mark not just a celebration of my success, but the first real demonstration of how far I had come without their recognition. As the villa buzzed with anticipation in my mind, a quiet doubt began to creep in, small at first, then insistent. Was I being petty? Was leaving my parents off the guest list a childish act of revenge, or a justified statement of self-worth? I paced through the sunlit living room, hands brushing the polished marble, and felt a twinge of guilt that made my chest tighten. Memories of their raised eyebrows and curt words flashed briefly, those moments of neglect I had carried for years. But now I wondered if I was stooping to their level by making this night about them. Even indirectly, I considered reaching out, sending a last-minute invitation. But the thought felt hollow, as though it would erase the subtle power I had carefully cultivated. The villa, the invitations, the anticipation of the evening. They were all my creation, my triumph, and letting them in at the last minute would feel like handing back control I had only just taken. I reflected on the contrast between their past indifference and the excitement that now surrounded me, the genuine admiration from friends and mentors who had supported me all along. It struck me that this wasn't about revenge alone. It was about recognition, about showing myself and the world that I deserved to be celebrated, even if they had never seen it before. Slowly, the guilt ebbed, replaced by a deliberate sense of empowerment, a quiet thrill that I was finally asserting my worth on my own terms. The internal conflict had served its purpose. It made the anticipation sharper, the eventual payoff sweeter. Tonight wasn't petty, it was strategic, a carefully orchestrated statement of triumph, and for the first time in years, I felt a calm certainty settle over me, mingled with the tingling excitement of what was to come. The day before the housewarming, the villa transformed into a whirlwind of activity, each detail meticulously planned to reflect not just celebration, but triumph. I coordinated with caterers, choosing dishes that were both luxurious and comforting, flavors that would linger in conversation long after the night ended. The floral arrangements arrived, each bloom carefully selected for color, elegance, and subtle symbolism, a reminder that beauty could flourish even from neglect. A live band was booked, the kind that could play soft jazz as guests arrived, then swell to celebratory crescendo when the night peaked. I supervised the setup of lighting, ensuring the ocean's reflection danced across the terraces and mirrored walls, turning every corner into a scene of cinematic allure. Outside, valet attendants lined up to park luxury cars, a deliberate hint to anyone who might be watching that success wasn't just private, it was undeniable. I carefully chose my outfit for the night, something that combined sophistication with subtle audacity, a visual testament to the journey I had undertaken. Even the wine selection was intentional, each bottle a nod to milestones and hard-won victories, a toast to perseverance and resilience. As I moved from room to room, checking arrangements and adjusting placements, the villa began to feel alive, humming with anticipation, as though it already knew the excitement that awaited. Yet beneath the meticulous planning, there was a deeper satisfaction. This housewarming wasn't just a party. It was a statement, a display of everything I had earned while being overlooked, a quiet yet resounding answer to years of neglect. Every detail, from the gleaming marble floors to the subtle sparkle in the chandelier, was a brushstroke in a larger picture, a celebration of independence, empowerment, and carefully orchestrated recognition that would leave a lasting impression on all who attended. And as the final touches fell into place, I stood back and let myself savor the feeling, knowing that tonight, the villa wouldn't just be my home. It would be the stage where absence became presence, where every slight from the past transformed into a triumphant, tangible reality. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting a golden glow over the ocean, my phone buzzed relentlessly with messages from friends confirming their attendance. Yet amid the excitement, one persistent emptiness gnawed at me. No word from my parents. I checked my messages repeatedly, hoping for a last-minute change of heart, but the silence only sharpened the tension. Friends texted me with a mix of curiosity and concern, some suggesting I call them, others nudging me to confront them directly. "Just tell them how you feel," one wrote. "Don't let them ruin your night," another urged. I paused, feeling the familiar tug-of-war between impulse and strategy. Part of me ached for acknowledgement, craving that simple parental pride, yet a stronger, steadier part recognized the power I now held. Tonight wasn't about confrontation. It was about presence, mine, theirs absent, the contrast already speaking volumes. Each notification from friends amplified the suspense, their excitement a mirror to my own anticipation. I imagined my parents sitting comfortably elsewhere, unaware that every detail of the villa, every guest arriving in admiration, was a silent testament to their choice. Their absence had inadvertently set the stage for a dramatic reversal, one I would orchestrate without saying a word. And as I checked the clock again, feeling the tension thrum like the low beat of a drum, I allowed a quiet smile to form, savoring the suspense. The night was about to begin, and I held the cards. They had unknowingly set themselves up for the reality of my triumph. The first guests arrived just as the sun kissed the horizon, golden light spilling across the villa's glass walls. The air buzzed with excitement as friends stepped onto the marble floors, their eyes widening at the panoramic view of the ocean, the infinity pool shimmering like liquid sapphire. "I can't believe this place," one friend whispered, voice tinged with awe. "It's unreal," another added, trailing a finger along the sleek countertop. I greeted them warmly, letting their admiration wash over me, savoring the subtle thrill of being recognized in a way I had longed for my entire life. Laughter echoed through the terraces as groups formed, clinking glasses and commenting on every detail. The curated art, the sparkling chandeliers, the carefully chosen flowers. Amid the cheerful chatter, I couldn't help but notice the occasional pause, a quiet murmur as someone realized my parents were not among the crowd. Whispers fluttered like nervous butterflies. Did her parents not come? Really, they skipped it? Each question, each hushed comment, sent a flicker of FOMO through the room, a silent acknowledgement of their absence. I felt a small surge of satisfaction, a quiet power settling in my chest as the contrast became tangible. The villa, already a monument to my independence, now radiated a social weight that made my parents' omission sting even more. Conversations shifted to stories of my journey, friends marveling at the determination it must have taken to reach this point, curiosity laced with admiration. I smiled and shared anecdotes with a casual confidence, letting my words hint at triumph without gloating. Each laugh, each raised eyebrow, each impressed murmur was a small victory, a subtle reversal of the neglect I had endured for so long. And as more guests arrived, their eyes drinking in every detail, I knew that the villa wasn't just my home tonight. It was a stage, and the tension of absence made every moment resonate with power, promise, and the thrilling anticipation of what was yet to come. As the evening reached its peak, I stepped forward, glass in hand, feeling the warm hum of conversation settle into attentive silence. I raised my voice just enough to carry across the terrace, the ocean breeze catching strands of hair that framed my face. "I want to thank all of you for coming tonight," I began, letting my eyes sweep across the crowd of friends, colleagues, and mentors. "It means more than I can say to celebrate this space, this moment, and everything it represents." I paused, savoring the gentle murmur of agreement, the subtle nods of admiration. Then with deliberate calm I added, "And I can't help but notice a few familiar absences, some who perhaps didn't think this night was worth attending." A faint gasp rippled through the guests, eyes widening as the implication sank in. The silence that followed was thick and potent. The absence I had long endured suddenly transformed into a social statement. Conversations faltered momentarily, whispers spreading like wildfire. Her parents didn't come? After all this, they skipped it? I felt the power shift subtly, a delicious tension settling over the gathering, as if the air itself acknowledged the reversal. I sipped my wine and let a small, controlled smile play at my lips, aware that this was the moment the narrative tilted. The absent figures of authority, the parents who had once dictated the emotional landscape of my life, were now destabilized by their very choice to ignore me. I continued my toast, weaving in gratitude and quiet pride, letting the words land with both elegance and subtle edge. The crowd responded with applause, murmurs of respect, and light laughter, all tinged with recognition of the unspoken drama unfolding. In that instant, the villa no longer just celebrated my success, it highlighted their absence, framing it as a social faux pas, a glaring contrast between the life I had built and the neglect they had offered. And as glasses clinked and conversations resumed, I felt a thrill of vindication pulse through me, knowing that the first true power reversal had landed, emotionally destabilizing the very people who had underestimated me for so long. Just as the murmurs about my parents' absence began to settle, a familiar figure approached the center of the terrace. One of my mentors, someone whose opinion I had always respected, and who carried a quiet authority in social circles. The room seemed to pause, attention naturally gravitating toward them. With a warm smile, they turned toward me, voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "I have to say," they began, "watching your journey has been incredible. From the early days of struggle to this moment, you've shown resilience, brilliance, and determination. And now, seeing this villa, this celebration, you deserve every bit of admiration." Their words spread through the crowd like wildfire, eyes widening, whispers trailing after them. I felt my chest swell with pride, a mixture of relief and vindication flooding through me. Guests exchanged impressed glances, some leaning in to hear more, others whispering quietly to one another. And I knew, even without seeing them directly, that my parents would hear these words eventually. The subtle social positioning, the public acknowledgement of my success, was a form of quiet but undeniable karmic justice. Their absence, once a sting, now became glaringly apparent against the backdrop of my recognition and praise. Each word from my mentor elevated not only my social status, but the emotional impact of the evening, amplifying the tension and contrast that had been building since the first invitation was declined. I caught glimpses of raised eyebrows, smiles tinged with envy, and nods of approval, all converging to create a sense of dramatic satisfaction. In that moment, the villa wasn't just my home. It was a stage where recognition, respect, and triumph played out publicly, and my parents' choice to abstain from the celebration had inadvertently highlighted their own oversight. The crowd's energy surged, laughter and conversation now infused with admiration, and I felt a thrill that had nothing to do with wealth alone. It was the satisfaction of being seen, validated, and celebrated by those who truly mattered, all while the absent figures who once held power over my self-worth remained conspicuously missing. The evening had transformed into a vivid tableau of triumph, karma, and social vindication, a perfect crescendo that left both guests and me buoyed by the emotional high. Later that evening, just as the laughter and music began to settle into comfortable rhythms, my phone buzzed with a notification that made my heart skip. It was a message from my parents, tentative, apologetic, and far too late. "We heard about the villa. We should talk," it read. A thin attempt at reconciliation that felt awkward against the backdrop of the night I had carefully orchestrated. I stared at the screen, a mix of emotions coursing through me. Lingering hurt, a flicker of satisfaction, and a quiet, measured pride. Years of dismissal and neglect had shaped me, but they had also prepared me for this very moment. I thought back to the whispers among my guests, the admiring glances, the mentor's praise echoing in my ears, and I felt the full weight of my triumph. Confrontation would be easy. I could let them see their oversight, make them squirm, demand acknowledgement. But as I sat back, I realized that true victory didn't require a fight. It required restraint and dignity. I didn't need their approval to validate my worth, nor their words to affirm the life I had built. Instead, I allowed myself to reflect on how far I had come, the journey from overlooked child to independent, celebrated adult. Their tentative messages felt small against the panorama of my success, reminders of the contrast between past neglect and present empowerment. I acknowledged the sting of their absence, but it no longer held the power it once had. I could engage if I wanted, or I could simply savor the quiet satisfaction of knowing that tonight, my accomplishments spoke louder than any apology ever could. And in that reflection, I discovered a deeper sense of self-respect, a calm that surpassed the thrill of social vindication, and entered the realm of true personal triumph. Their late attempt at connection could not diminish the night, the villa, or the recognition I had earned. It only underscored the growth and dignity I now carried with me. As the night reached its golden peak, I felt a quiet swell of confidence and gratitude. I raised my glass, letting the warm light of the chandeliers catch on its rim, and waited for the gentle hush that always comes when a toast begins. "Tonight," I started, voice steady and sincere, "is more than just a celebration of this home. It's a celebration of the journey, the struggles, the quiet victories that brought me here. Every challenge, every doubt, every moment of feeling overlooked has led to this night. Surrounded by people who have lifted me, believed in me, and celebrated me when others chose not to. I paused, letting the words sink in, scanning the crowd and noting the smiles, nods, and attentive eyes. I could feel the subtle tension as my parents' absence hung in the background, an unspoken acknowledgement of choices made and opportunities missed. I raise this glass to growth, to independence, and to the people who remind us that our worth isn't measured by approval, but by perseverance and integrity. The applause rippled through the terrace, cheers echoing against the ocean breeze. Guests leaned in to offer congratulations, some whispering about the courage and poise it took to orchestrate such a moment, others marveling at the contrast between the night's joy and the absence that fueled it. I allowed a small, proud smile to settle on my lips, fully aware of the subtle shift in power. The recognition, the admiration, the validation of my efforts, all while remaining dignified and graceful. My parents' potential regret lingered in the edges of my mind, but it no longer affected my joy. This toast, this gathering, was a testament not to spite, but to triumph, and the emotional release it created for me and my guests was palpable. In that moment, the villa, the ocean, the laughter, and the pride coalesced into a perfect symphony of vindication and fulfillment. Tonight wasn't just a celebration, it was closure, a cinematic culmination of every slight, every overlooked moment, and every quiet victory that had carried me to this point. And as the clinking of glasses echoed across the terrace, I let myself feel the full weight of the triumph, dignified, empowered, and unshakably at peace. As the last guests waved goodbye and their cars disappeared down the winding drive, the villa fell into a serene quiet that felt almost sacred. The soft hum of the ocean replaced laughter, and the scent of flowers mingled with the faint traces of wine and celebration. I walked slowly through the rooms, letting my fingers brush the smooth surfaces, recalling snippets of conversations, the laughter, the small gasps at my parents' absence, and the applause that had followed my final toast. Each moment replayed vividly in my mind, a montage of triumph, vindication, and quiet joy. I allowed myself a small chuckle, remembering how one of my friends had whispered, "Can you believe they didn't come? They're going to regret this." That little spark of humor, tinged with justice, felt deliciously satisfying. I sank into a plush chair, gazing at the moonlit waves, and reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The years of being overlooked, the dismissals, the quiet ache of invisibility. And yet, all of that had shaped the determination and resilience that now defined me. Recognition by those who mattered, friends, mentors, colleagues, was infinitely more meaningful than any acknowledgement I had longed for from my parents. I smiled, thinking about the contrast, the villa alive with admiration and excitement tonight, and the absent figures who had underestimated me for decades, left out entirely. Pride settled over me like a warm cloak, tempered with a light-hearted appreciation for the irony of it all. The night had been more than a celebration. It had been a statement, a personal and social declaration of worth, and in the quiet aftermath, as the ocean whispered against the shore, I felt a deep, satisfying sense of empowerment. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving their neglect. I was thriving in spite of it. And the memory of tonight would linger long after the lights were turned off and the doors closed. As the villa settled into stillness, I stood on the terrace, the moonlight shimmering across the ocean, and allowed myself a final moment of reflection. I imagined my parents somewhere in their routine, likely uncomfortable, perhaps even quietly disappointed, realizing the night they had missed and the statement they had inadvertently reinforced. I felt a flicker of satisfaction, yes, but it was tempered with a calm compassion. Resentment no longer had a hold over me. Years of neglect had shaped me. But they had also built resilience, independence, and a sense of self-worth that no absence could erase. I thought about the laughter, the admiration, and the small moments of social vindication from earlier, each one a reminder that my life was now fully my own, and that recognition from those who mattered most carried more weight than any parental approval ever could. There was a gentle humor in the contrast. The life I had built, vibrant and celebrated, versus the quiet regret of those who chose not to witness it. I let out a soft, satisfied sigh, knowing that the night had delivered both triumph and closure. My journey had transformed pain into empowerment, absence into clarity, and hurt into a quiet joy that was mine and mine alone. Looking back, I realized that the housewarming wasn't just about a villa or a party. It was about reclaiming my narrative, asserting my worth,